We lost sound this time. Shoot. Wait, here, there we go. Hold on.
I'm
There,
here.
there we go.
All right. I think for me it's perfect.
Yes, and no echo anymore.
Oh,
Perfect.
finally, finally.
Yes, we're doing excellent now, Vitor.
48 minutes.
I, yeah, I know. I'm sure that lots of people in the chat have probably gone and come back maybe a couple of times, but it's okay. It's okay. We're gonna hopefully get it started now. If you
Yeah.
want, I'll just give you, or you could do it yourself. You sent me that short bio, but if you want,
Yeah.
actually, rather than me just reading from the bio, if you want, you could just explain to the people like who you are, your past, why you contacted me, and what you hope to discuss today in this video.
Sure, sure. So my name is Vitor. I was born in Portugal. I've been living abroad for 13 years between a few countries, naming Spain, Poland, Ireland, and I'm currently in Budapest, so in Hungary. So I recently joined ThinkSpot to network and to start a new journey in terms of writing. So I've been writing books mainly on literature, poetry, travel, memories, but I would like to start developing something different, which is content for men. So in terms of motivation, coaching, and stuff like that. And on that, I would most likely use my, let's say, political views or my political background.
Right.
And the reason why I contact you is because I want to reach out to people, share ideas, and spread my message. I also learn from others. So here we are, and we already learned something IT related.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, like I say, I really appreciate you did reach out to me, and I've noticed there's been a few actually. I've got interviews lined up for the next couple of weeks already from other ThinkSpot contributors, and that's one of the things I did notice early on. That the good thing about ThinkSpot, not just based on the name, but by sheer fact that Jordan Peterson was kind of at the front and center, and he's a very much an ideas kind of man, and that was the whole point of having a website such as ThinkSpot, is to get away from the minutia of just mindless political talking points. Basically, is what you get right from most people in the other. And it's just this political tribalism where they want to identify as right or left, and it's like watching a hockey game but in politics, and I'm not interested in that, because that just means there's winners and losers. Whereas if we develop our minds properly and we articulate with clarity of language and clarity of thought what it means to even be a free human being, then everybody wins, right? That, to me, there's no losers in terms of having a discussion in regards to what does it even mean to be a free human being in the 21st century. So I'm very thankful. And like I say, to be able to discuss this with people, not just in my own country, but people all over the world who share that same kind of hunger or craving for this kind of knowledge is something that I'm very excited about doing.
Great. Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree with you on that point. I think we live in this polarized society where it's all about black against white, or white against black. I mean, we can switch the colors. You know, it's not about racism or anything. We can say green against blue or red against pink, whatever. It doesn't really matter. But this tribalism, I think it's really going back in time. It doesn't reach us anywhere. And we really need a common ground. And I think there's no such a time where common sense is needed. I mean, I'm not that old. I mean, at least I believe. I just became 37 last month. And I remember when I was a teenager, the idea of common sense was something very boring. Like we were expecting people to be original, to add some extra. But nowadays, common sense is a blessing. When you see someone that sticks to something that it's I don't know, self-evident, it's almost like magic. So I guess this common ground, it's something urgent. I totally agree with you.
Right. Well, I think a large portion, or at least a contributing factor to that problem is, and of course, you have to go back to the historical context, whether you're especially in Western cultures, like whether you're talking post-Reformation, the Enlightenment era, there was a period in time when religion still dominated and had a substantial influence over the minds, and because in the West Christianity would have been the most dominant religion, there was at least this conceptual idea of the individual through the stories of Jesus Christ and free will. So these were things that whether you came about things from a dogmatic background in terms of religion, or you were someone that was more of an enlightened mind that was trying to come back things from the objective real world, there was still at least remnants of the pretense of like the ideal and these meta stories that were told, and the ideal had to of course be based upon the individual. That was the point of the Reformation, is because we are all individuals. We're not a collective. There's no such thing as the collective mind. We have individual minds, and the sovereignty of the individual is basically what humans are pursuing. And like I say, religion had that tied up, but because historically people used religion and that form of mysticism to trick people's minds into believing things that were abstractly provably, fallible and incorrect, the scientific realm stepped up into place. And I use this all the time, where even people such as Nietzsche kind of recognize after the fact, or during his journey, is once you've destroyed the concept of God or the ideal of the individual, then now you are open to complete subjective value, in terms of now you see it's expanded to the economy, to how we deal with each other socially, in the political realm, everything. And the postmodernists are the ones that greatly contribute to this, because they're the ones that basically told us there's no such thing as objective truth. Once you've destroyed the very premise or pretense of objective truth, and everything, if you create a scenario where everything is open to interpretation, then this is the problem where there's no such thing as common sense if there is no such thing as, common sense suggests that there is something that is usually universally consistent to be what most people believe. But now, like I say, the postmodernists, in conjunction with and some of these Marxists, right? They've basically created their own quasi-religion of such, and have now made it so that there is no such thing. And now we're arguing, like you say, rather than even getting into a discussion regarding how we start to shrink the size and scope of government, we can't even get at that point, because now we have to fight through hours and hours on end, just even with two adults that have well-developed brains, just trying to figure out what the proper concepts or the meanings of the words they're using. Because to me, that's before you can start even venturing into learning about truths or objective morality or ethics, is you have to have this clarity, like I say, what I was saying earlier, of language. When I was growing up, there was no such thing or any pretense that I get to redefine what words mean. No, I have to go by what these definitions mean. And our language come to be, universally understood by people that speak English, because of the fact that we're supposed to align with what these words and terms mean. Now we have to fight through, like I say, before we can actually get down to the depth of the real discussion that needs to take place. Now we got to fight with people to even understand what used to be common sense, that used to knowledge, the kind of knowledge that most people understood, at least when I was growing up. I mean, a perfect example is like debts and deficits, spending beyond your means, something as simple as that. And you even have politicians nowadays that are going, well, I mean, Trudeau in Canada, we have a prime minister, the guy that's supposed to be the leader of a country, right? Going around basically like, you don't have to worry about debts or deficits. Oh, it'll all just fix it. I mean, what kind of message are you sending to a people, the citizenry of any country, when you believe, because that, once again, money in its proper form is basically a representation of our value, what we provide, right? We can't all use barter. I mean, I've used the term like if you wanted an egg and I wanted an orange, and you had an egg, I had an orange, you had an egg, like we could swap. But what if I don't want what you want? What if I want something else? Money is basically just that tool that we use to allow us to exchange the value. So if I grew something, you grew something else, and I didn't want it, well, I could go somewhere else with someone. But that was all basically well understood, that yes, money had a proper defined meaning, like I say, a measure of value, a medium to exchange that value, and a means to retain that value for future use. Now, because of the way the rhetoric of sophists or the socialist types, or the people that like to, they suggest they don't like money, but boy, they sure seem to want to take over the controls or the mechanisms where money comes from. But that, like you say, that's the problem where I think we're having the biggest issue is just there's no clarity of language anymore. So it's really hard to even find a starting point for these kinds of conversations. Sorry, go ahead. I know I kind of went on.
Yeah, and another danger is that language is more and more a tool. It's not something to to understand reality or to communicate. It's a tool, and I think it's being used on the wrong direction. Words have no real meaning anymore, and they are just there, as a tool. So people, instead of using words, are being used by them. And that's very, very dangerous. It should be the other way around. We should take words to serve our purpose, not the other way around. And I mean, as you said, like these, I mean, I would describe the whole scenario as vacuum. So everything can be valid, everything, can work out, and people don't know exactly what they stand for. And actually, the whole idea of standing for something is dangerous. Like, how can you stand up for something that was never told, in social media, that was never told by a politician, by someone that is already, in the mainstream, or if you are on the side trying to tell something different, you're gonna be seen as an entertainer, that you are just there. It's like the clown. The clown is there to tell how things are not. I think this is very well described in 1984 when they created the figure of the opponent, and the opponent is there just to show how things are wrong. How can you not guide your life? How can you lead to disaster? So he's there, but he is also a creation of the system. And by the way, this idea of the opponent, I think it's very well put in how Donald Trump is shared among social media. For instance, when you see these crowds of idiots going to the street and shout against him, but shout without saying anything, this is a clear reproduction of I think it was called 5 minutes of hate, or I don't remember the number, or 3 minutes of hate, that every time that the opponent of 1984 was up in the media, people would go to the venue and would just shout against him without knowing what he was saying. And so the manipulation, it's much more profound than we can imagine, because people, they think they stand for something that they know what it is, but they have no clue. So it's really about using the words, and through the words they can manipulate our minds. And that I really hope that ThinkSpot can help on that, since I think it's more direct to people that think by themselves. And actually, at the end of the day, I usually say it's not about being leftish or rightish. It's about thinking by yourself, about questioning your own convictions. Actually, this is the people I respect or I admire. People that they even overcome their own, their own ideas, because it's very easy to go and tell, let's say, you are wrong, or the person I'm going to meet tomorrow for a coffee is wrong, or during the working hours, my manager or my workmates. But to tell yourself that you were not on the right side of the story, that's painful, but that's very, very necessary. And that's what I can tell about my political journey.
Yes, well, and I'm very interested to tell you that. And I got to say, just as a quick synopsis or summarization of my own life, is I come from a historically very religious background, and was born and raised for the early part of my life up till I was about 10 years old in a very small rural community in the east coast of Canada, which religion was very, very dominant. And then, of course, I was also indoctrinated. So that was when I was going to school, Sunday school or church, and that was reinforced by the figureheads in the community, whether it's parents or relatives or the preachers or all the people that were in those leadership positions. But of course, I also was indoctrinated in another quasi-religion called statism, right? Which is something that happens, right? So I've had to go on a couple of journeys where I had to break through a lot of the paradigms. And like you were saying, it's rough, because once you start destroying some of these walls that have been built up around you, it's a big old world out there. And I see why a lot of people get scared of that enlightenment, and they want to seek or retreat to the safety or comfort of their former tribal group. So whether it's the political class or the religious teaching, there's someone seeking comfort some way. So that is inherent in human beings. But like I say, in the modern day, humans, we've got the intellectual geniuses throughout the past that we all stand upon today. I feel so emboldened that, first of all, inspired and very appreciative of the fact that these people brought us to this point where now I have access to the information that allowed me to break through those prior paradigms. And I can't help but be a kind of person today that I just want to scream from the rooftops the fact that I was given this amazing knowledge to break through from these preconceived notions. I want to share that with the rest of the world. I don't care, like you say, don't give a crap about your skin color. I don't care what religion you come from. I don't care about any of that stuff. I want to make sure, because for me to be a free human being, I need the rest of the people to believe or even have a firm grasp or understanding of what that even means, what that entails. Once they at least get a firm grasp of what that means, and we can eliminate a lot of the mysticism and contradictions, that always breaks down human communication and our ability to cohabitate and coexist peacefully. I think, like I say, I think the future is looking good. But the problem we're running into, and you're kind of recognizing yourself, is it's born and bred right into us, right through the evolutionary, whether you believe in evolution or the creator. But even if you're a believer of the creator, humans have evolved over a period of time. So you kind of got to believe in the fact, or adaptation, whatever you want to call it. But human beings, it's instinctive in us to have an in-group preference, obviously, because we would have always been predominantly surrounded by our own in-group or our small tribes. But like I say, in the 21st century, there's no need. It's not a necessity anymore. In times of necessity, it's okay if you have to retreat to those kind of things to seek some kind of safety or security or protection. But like I say, that is not the world we're living in today. Today, we live in the world where I've coined the phrase Enlightenment Era 2.0, because we had the Gutenberg press in the past, which helped adopt and enlighten a lot of human beings past the old world mysticism. But now I think we need to take one more step in that journey, in that venture, and enlighten the people's minds even further now that we have not just the Gutenberg press, but the internet at our disposal as well. So yeah, go ahead. I do definitely want to hear about your political journey, because I'm sure it's something that a lot of people will share some agreements.
It's a bit different from yours, especially at the beginning. I think, I don't know it that well, but I think we end up in a similar platform. But at least the genesis of it's quite different. But that's how I think it's going to be fascinated. So I'm coming from a Marxist family.
Oh, okay. Okay.
A bit different from religious, huh?
Right.
So yeah, my father is still a member of the Communist Party. Okay. He's part of the union. He was working, for a factory. So I think that tells about these three elements. And my mom is a moderated Catholic. So okay. Quite interesting mix. Yeah. Yeah. So as I usually say, I think we never go 180 degrees, no? 180 degrees. Yeah. We can never go 180 degrees. So there's always something residual that will stay with you, right, even if you overcome this or that. So, I guess I can relate to that as well. But anyway, what I want to say is, so politically, I was somehow orientated, even though, and I have to say that in favor of my father, he never intentionally influenced me. But the papers were around, the flyers, and of course, I learned how to read in the propaganda from the Communist Party, literally. Mm-hmm. So when I was a little kid, like 6-8 years old, I knew already a few cities in the ex-USSR. Which is quite fascinating. At the age of 10, I could tell already 10 cities in, I don't know, in Ukraine or in Poland. So it has a big influence on me. Plus, not only family-wise, but the city where I came from, it's what we would call labor town. Where the working class has a big influence. Right. So the Communist Party was in the municipality since 1974, when democracy came into the country. They were there for around 30 years consecutively, and they are so omnipresent in my hometown, that, let's say, if tomorrow I invite you for a coffee in my hometown, I can easily tell you, we can meet. I don't know where are we heading for coffee, but we can meet in front of the party, and you will tell me, but which party? There's no other party. It's the Communist Party, Yeah,
Right.
people take it as granted, It looks
Yeah.
it looks like a joke, but it works like that. I can easily tell you, let's meet in front of the party, and there are other guys who are there, with their buildings, but nothing compared to what I call the cathedral of the Communist Party.
Right.
So I was a member of the Youth Communist Party myself,
Okay.
up to the age of I think I was 16 when I dropped. But I was luckily enough, and I think wise enough. Of course, I was still a teenager to see how things are operating, and all the hypocrisy, all the false customs, these things of preaching one thing and practicing something different, and I quit quite early. So I was, as I said, I think I was a 16 or 17 or something like that, and I was back and forth till my early 20s, and finally I moved abroad at the age of 23, and that was a life changing in all senses, not only politically but in terms of my whole mindset. Of course, it's not only about being abroad, but when you jump into your professional life, or you have to pay your own expenses, I think there's a dramatic change when you see the universe from your teenager bedroom,
Yes.
and when you have to pay and your rent, or ask for a mortgage, or wash your dishes. I think the what is really sad is that there are people who are 50 or even older, and they still live in a teenager bedroom.
Yes.
I mean, if you are a teenager, that's fine. Actually, you need to live that. You need to be 16 and think that you can go out and change the road from one day to another. But if you are still behaving, as a teenager at the age of 50 or 60, maybe there's something wrong. So yeah, I think so. When I went abroad and I started to work in corporate companies and dealing with people from different parts of Europe, mainly also from the Americas, but mainly from Europe, it opened up my perspectives, but not only open up in the sense that I saw other perspectives that are correct. It also confirmed that some that I brought were also correct, because we have this idea, this I think is a leftish idea or progressive idea, let's put it like that, that we confront ourselves with other cultures, and other cultures are better. This is not that mathematics. Sometimes we see others, and actually our hometown that we cursed was somehow correct. So it's not it's not only about turning back in what I had back there, but also in finding the better elements of all the things I came across.
Right.
So that was more or less in a nutshell.
Yeah, well, I when it comes to stuff like that, and I'm glad that you do have that background, because to me, it wasn't communist in terms of growing up under religious teaching, but there was very much dependent on, because once again, this funny part or insane part of it is you could go, especially here in Canada, you could go to a Presbyterian, Protestant, Christian, or Baptist, Wesleyan, Pentecostal. I mean, there's probably at least a half dozen or more denominations. They all read from the exact same Bible, but if you went to each one of those churches, you get a complete different interpretation of the words. They're all reading from the exact same verses, right? But they have a completely different way of interpreting those words. So, but there are some of them that are very much the way you're taught. I've thought about this as an adult. It's like, well, geez, it could make you a pretty darn good communist, like sacrificing yourself, for the greater good, or the collective. Like some of the teachings in some of these churches, these religious institutions, they basically teach you that pretense of the greater good. Now, to me, whether you come at it from a religious aspect, or a political background, or whatever the ideology of choice that brought you to where you're at today is, you have to test any thesis. To me, the thing as an adult, once you've reached maturity and adult, and like I say, you're a critical thinking person of any scope, is you just got to run things through the first principle. Just like if you were doing a science experiment, right? You have to be able to test these hypotheses out. So to me, that's the thing that broke down a lot of the religious teaching, and obviously government was, like I say, universalized. So government, even government, whether you got this teaching from a religious institution or a government institution, right? Theft is bad. Theft is wrong. That is an overarching narrative. That's a meta narrative for any of these institutions that are supposed to come across as benevolent in some way, or that sets up the rules for societal engagements. So to me, like I say, whether it's the religion or the state, the minute I recognize that there's a contradiction, like you say, that's like the preacher that says, you have to give your 10% tithing, and then the guy never puts a dime to the collection, right? That, to me, that's a hypocrite, or that's someone they're speaking out both sides of the mouth simultaneously. You're saying one thing, but you're not adhering to the very principles that you're espousing. To me, that's what the state represents as well. And that's something that's like I say, has caused me to have to break through. It's not just a matter that I dislike government or dislike certain politicians. It's the fact that we actually, as adults, grow up into believing that there are certain people have some legitimate claim of authority to rule over, millions of people, when in reality, like I say, they don't even lead by example. So, the typical politician would say that theft is wrong. And if you steal from someone, well, they'll try to, charge you with a criminal offense. You'll be run through the court system. And if you're found guilty, you'll have to either pay a fine or go to jail. But yet, what do politicians, how do they get their paycheck? Through forced wealth and income redistribution, which is theft by another name, whether some people want to call it extortion. But it's not that I have ever, or you, or most people have never grown up and said, oh, yes, whatever a politician gets in office, whatever they decide, however much of a percentage they want of my paycheck, I'm just supposed to just say, yeah, it's okay because, they're my authority. That, to believe that which tells you just how powerful propaganda and indoctrination is, and why it has to happen and take place very early on. I think if most of us avoided these kind of indoctrination type tactics in our early years, I don't think, if you reached, let's say, teenage years, I don't think you could ever be convinced, if you start at teenage years, if someone started trying to tell you, oh yeah, you should allow this person to take money from you, even though you'd be like, what the hell? The only reason why people believe that is because they're taught that from very, very early ages. So to me, the most important thing we can do is, once you've come to that realization or had that revelation for yourself, I like to use the comparison to, could you imagine being having a bit of a brain fart here. Galileo. Could you imagine being Galileo and come to the realization that, after he did his observations and confirmed, what was it? Not Aquinas. Who was the other guy before him that speculated that the fact? Sorry, yeah. So, but once he confirmed and realized that no, the Earth isn't the center of the universe. To me, when I broke through all these paradigms and these preconceived notions and concepts that were drilled in my head as a kid, and I realized as an adult that, they're all built on abstract like complete lies, complete mysticism, and impossibilities. To me, I feel like Galileo, and I feel like, once again, I'm back to the shouting at the rooftops. I want people to realize, because I understand what a benefit it was for us to realize, not just the fact that we can send ships up into space today, thanks to Galileo, because, it was really hard, trying to keep that Ptolemaic system, you had to keep moving things around so much. But it made things so much more seamless and simpler for human beings, which is what most human beings are going to crave or desire, is something that's more simplistic, because not everyone's want to get into the nitty gritty or intellectual vigor of figuring these things out. So to me, it's however we can simplify these very concepts that, like I say, will be beneficial for us societally. Well, hopefully we won't even need to worry about the politics of things at some point in time in the future. But to me, the most important thing we can do is help break people free from these mindsets that, once again, have been a detriment. And we've seen, like, the 20th century, statism on its own was quite detrimental, right? People use that pretext of statism and that in-group preference and tribalism and it caused the demise of, tens of millions of people in Europe and even some of the ones that, traveled to North America, Canada, US as well. So to me, that's the best thing that we can do now as adults living in the 21st century, which is this new age of information. Is I don't know what the answer is going to be, but I do know at the very least we have to give people a simple formula, and that simple formula is remove all the contradictions when they're presented to you, when people that are trying to be your whether they want to be your thought leader or be an authority of any form. If a person, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So I think everyone, regardless of their background, listen to all these fairy tales that when we come to maturity, as you said, it turned out that they're not reliable as we expect. So it doesn't matter if you come from a religious background, Marxist background, a green background. We are told all these fairy tales, and all these sentences, that they make no sense. So people take things as granted, and sometimes they rebel against this concept. And instead of thinking what they can do themselves to change, they go and blame others. So they go and blame the state, they go and blame the neighbor. But I believe that there is always, as much as the state can be oppressor, for instance, as you mentioned in the Second World War, when the Nazis, for instance, were in power, I believe there is always a little bit that you can improve, and it's here. So you can always be a bit free regardless of the circumstances. So, for instance, what I do when, let's say, I'm a proud Zionist, okay? So if we wanted to talk about it, we can also discuss that. Okay. So every time there is a terror attack in Israel, I go to 3 different sources. There is this Times of Israel, who is a sort of centrist. There is Haaretz, which is totally leftist, and there is Jerusalem Post, who is a Zionist newspaper. And if you read the 3 articles, it seems that 3 different things took place in Israel. It's impressive.
Yes,
if you read it through Haaretz, the Israelis also did something wrong, even if 50 civilians died. If you read the Times of Israel, it's a bit neutral, but sometimes doesn't go into detail because it might be controversial. And if you read the J Post, it turns out that Palestinians are just killing people for the sake of being evil. So, of course, maybe I'm exaggerating a bit in each of the articles, but that's somehow how they come up with the story. So what I do to keep myself critical of what's happening, whenever something major is happening either in Israel or wherever, I try to go to different sources. And also myself, I try to read it, let's say, this evening and tomorrow morning, because maybe my mood is different. For instance, I was going mad with the Wi-Fi here, and maybe tomorrow morning I'm going to be more relaxed, maybe not. So it's always good to take our time to understand how things happening instead of just telling the fairy tale that we were told in our childhood, or just the how is it called, the big letters of an article without going into detail. So what is really important, since we have so many sources of so-called information, is to go through different moments of our life, try to talk to different people. Actually, I do enjoy to talk to people that think different from me, because I enjoy confrontation. I really enjoy it. And yes. Sometimes I'm nasty enough that I can agree with someone and try to say things different, just to see how can they defend what they really think, to see whether they are aware of what they're talking about. So right. For me, it's very easy to take this. I just got stuck here. Can you see me?
Yeah, it's still a little frozen on the screen there, but I can still hear you. So go right ahead there. It's froze on the screen there for a second, I think.
Yeah, it's not very pretty, but anyway.
I just checked. I have Oh, it's running a little behind because I have the YouTube portion open too, and it's still streaming on that end. But you're still fine on this end. Like I say, it's just the picture seems to have frozen.
Okay, let me go back. No, I stopped the cam and I'm restarting. Oh God.
Interesting so far. Interesting. Should be like I say, I'm definitely enjoying this conversation. I wonder what maybe he's just going to try switching over to his phone, perhaps. Just wait here for a second. I will definitely, as long as I don't go too long in this stream here, because I get to spend some time doing some other things today, but I will take some questions after the stream, like I say, as long as it doesn't go too long. Oh, there we go. Let's see.
I'm back.
There we go. You're back.
Okay. Yeah, I just restarted. Yeah. I didn't want to go through the settings again. I had enough of that, so I just restarted the whole thing. And It was a matter of 1 minute. So here we go.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah. In terms of the state, just in a few words, yeah. I think all of us who value to think by ourselves, we are always a bit concerned when it comes to the state. It looks like now this big monster, this scary dragon that we want to stay away from. So yeah, I, regardless of my political convictions, I'm always a bit suspicious about the intentions from the state. But I also believe that the state or let's say the government that was elected, that's what I mean, it's a mirror of the people. So maybe it's not the best compliment for Canadians with your current government. So sorry for all the Canadians that are in this streaming, but there is a reason for these guys to be there. I mean, I can tell you what is my opinion about the Canadian government. I don't know that much like you guys, but I mean, I heard how they behave, and I mean, every time I see a politician that instead of sharing his ideas is showing his socks, I think there is already something fishy on that. So.
well, actually, that's perfect. And actually, after I finish this, I want you to get into your Zionism and kind of talk a little bit about that. But okay. I guess what I was trying to go with saying that is that what you're saying when you're talking about the state. This is why I believe that the future of humanity, liberty, is going to go the opposite way of globalism. If individual freedom is ever going to truly flourish, is right. Instead of going to globalism, where it's one world government, or right now where we have 200 individual governments or state, roughly in and around there, I eventually, when there's actual human freedom, you'll have 7+ billion states, right? Which is the sovereignty of the individual, which is we can deal with each other, but we look at and perceive each other as equals in terms of authority. So the only authority that I would ever be able to give to you is if I've personally signed a like if I go to work for someone, I'm giving them the authority to dictate and tell me what to do while I'm working in that environment. Well, to a degree, right? But that's all set up under the contractual obligation. But like when you were saying, like in terms of the prime minister and being the face of Canada, see, this is the problem with forced association and the way the state functions today is it seeks to deny the actual genuine differences that represents all 37 million Canadians and seeks to try to collectivize us as if there could possibly be one man that represents, people like just me and my neighbor alone. I mean, I like my neighbor the very best, but we're definitely like two worlds and like basically live in two different worlds in terms of ethics and morality in certain aspects, right? So to me, that's the only way I believe that humanity will ever gain our freedom is if we start getting more and more sovereignty. So rather than 200 states, to me, a perfect example of Canada, we have such things as what they're calling right now. Well, Quebec, because they disagree with a lot of things of English Canada, French and English Canada have a lot of things they disagree with. They've been wanting to go sovereign themselves, to become their own country themselves since basically the 90s. They almost actually got that during a referendum back then, and it was like just barely under the threshold needed. But I'm saying, yeah, why should there be such thing as forced association? Doesn't mean that they can't exchange voluntarily, contractually, back and forth, just like you and I, we can, but I should never be forced, right? There should be no such thing as forced association. Just like right now, Alberta, one of our provinces, Alberta, is going through some really, really tough times because they have a very big stake in the oil and gas industry. That's basically one of their main employers, is the oil and gas industry. But because British Columbia, which is a very left-leaning anti-oil and gas, well, the political class at least, are against that kind of extraction, but yet they're the only way you can get your oil to market, because you have to travel through British Columbia, or on the East Coast where I'm at, Quebec is another one of those provinces. So basically, Alberta is landlocked. They can't get their oil to market by sheer fact that there are these states or these sovereign provinces that claim such huge ownership over lands and forced association, where people can't actually be productive themselves by no fault of their own. Like, there's lots of land through British Columbia that you could find where you're not traveling or traipsing on anyone's property rights, where there's nobody using that land currently, right? But because there's these things called the state of the government of Canada, or the province of British Columbia, or the First Nations community or leaders, and they're even having the problem. Actually, I'm loving the way this is unfolded today, because the big divide that we're seeing is not just the federal government in Canada and the provincial governments and their conflicts in terms of energy and resource extracting, but even now when you're looking at the First Nations people, they're basically divvied up into two types of political classes. So they have what they call the hereditary chiefs. So these are the people, just by sheer fact that, if you were born by this and you're the son of this person, and this person is just like kings and queens, right? So a hereditary chief is if you were the chief, or your family line had chiefdom from 1,000 years ago, well, it's your inherent right to now claim ownership over tens of thousands of square kilometers of land. To me, that's the problem with forced association, or this pretense that anyone has any legitimate claim over these things. Oh, actually, let me get the other side of that. So there's the hereditary chiefs, and they're saying they don't want pipelines on their land, and they're claiming this like huge swath of land that they're not actually doing anything productive with. They just claim it, just like the state, right? Just like the federal government or the provincial government. But we also have what is called treaty rights, where the provincial and federal governments have agreements, political agreements with these First Nation representatives, but they're through a different political class. They're the ones that are claiming are part of the democratic process that made agreements with the king or the Queen of England, right? Or Canada proper. So this is the problem now. So even they are having this problem is, well, who is the ruler? Who's the one that truly owns all this land? Now, me as a libertarian, I would say, no, actually, there's places where nobody has any pretense where they can suggest that they own that large swath of land. If you can be productive on it, if you can show that you have actual land, you're doing something, you have a home, that, yes, I'm a whole firm believer in property rights, but it's this overarching mystical concept where people, whether through historical context or even modern today, when you're talking about modern democracies, where everyone can claim some kind of collective ownership, yet try to square that peg with saying that this is the thing with the First Nation people think about how this is playing out. They're saying the Canadian government has no right to go through our property, right? So they're admitting that they're claiming ownership over property, yet they would deny, right, the king or the queen, right? When the Queen said, "Oh, I claim ownership over all of Canada," they would say, "No, you have no legal authority to claim that." Well, who gave these First Nation groups some claim of authority over all this? So once again, even I'm sure, even these people who are having these arguments or discussions in the political realm, surely something in their head must recognize that they're contradicting themselves on a continuing, ongoing basis. And that's the problem with the commons and this forced association or collective ownership. Whereas if there was genuine respect of the sovereignty of the individual and genuine private property rights, I think that would greatly reduce a lot of the issues, and not just in terms of this particular one, but like you were saying, let's say you did still kind of agree with communism. To me, as I'm all for it. To me, there should be all kinds of social economic experiments all over the planet, because that's just like if you're trying to produce anything else that's a commodity or a product or a service in the world. Competition is key, and competition is going to determine, and it's going to be the driver that will determine what people will have personal particular preferences for. Just like if I go to the grocery store, I might want Wonder Bread. Somebody else might prefer a different bread. I should never have the authority to say, well, there should only be Wonder Bread. I say there should be you have whatever kind of bread you want, and you have your bread, I'll have my bread. The only thing that I need for everyone to understand that's universal is you don't get to force me to buy Wonder Bread, and I won't force you to buy, Weston bread, let's say. So that's, to me, it's if people that want to set up a commune and do things, because there's some things in terms of communists, in terms of what they are against, right? The overarching, the big boss that oppresses the workers. I'm against that, just like anyone else. Right. And to me, if you can set up any kind of experiment where the working class can do some kind of cooperatives or something along those lines, right? As long as they're voluntarily entered into, that is the way where now if we don't have forced association, well, there's much less reason for us to have to battle each other or go to war with each other or use that big, gigantic, mystical gun in the room, which is government, the monopoly of force or violence. Because there's only one, everyone's going to try to grab hold or control of that big, giant use of force, because they don't want it pointed at them. So they're going to have to use it to point at others. I'm saying no. Actually, you don't want any situation or scenario. I've used this example a few times in the past, and tell me if you think this is kind of proper for what I'm defining here. Is imagine yourself if you're in a room and there's 100 people in this room. Now, would you rather be in a room? Now, I would say the best case scenario ever, this utopian idea, right, is there's no such thing as a gun. So everybody in the room, no one has access to a gun in the room. So that puts people back on equal footing. But does it really? Not necessarily, because there's still going to be physical competence, right? Yeah. And there's still a varying degree of physical competence among all those 100 people in stature, in strength, in their ability to use their skills, to defeat their opponent. But to me, actually, rather than having that one gun in the room or no gun in the room, well, because that's the other thing. If you introduce that one gun in the room, everyone's going to want to wrestle to take control of that gun. Whereas if everybody, all 100 people, have access or equal access to a gun of their own, actually, you'll end up a room of people. And I've seen this not just in the rural communities I've grown up in, but even in places such as Texas, which is very, very, very pro gun. Everyone carries guns, but actually a lot heavy in terms of gun carriage is a lot lower crime. Why? Because people recognize instinctively that there's an automatic direct threat that could be imposed upon them if they don't at least align with some societal norms in terms of not using force, violence, or theft towards their fellow man, woman, and child. That's the problem to me with government and this forced association. In terms of one overarching government, is there's no way. It's the perfect scenario to create warring factions, which is I want us to all to have our own sovereignty, and doesn't mean that we can't align with each other as long as, like I say, as long as it's done through voluntary means, just like what we do in trade. I don't have to like the king of Saudi Arabia, but I'm really appreciative of the fact that there's millions of oils a barrel being pumped out of that place every day, and I'm not going to say it's a bad thing that people use it, because they're not using it because they specifically want to support, the Saudi regime. It's just people are using it because they know the difference between separating, our productive use of resources. But it doesn't mean that you have to necessarily socially or politically align with the king of Saudi, right? Yeah. That's really what it comes down to me is let's get rid of this forced association. First and foremost.
But going back to Canada, so you were complaining about how the state is present in daily life, and how you need to tell them what you do, and how you need to somehow depend on them. In a way, Canada and US are in a better position than us in Europe, because we have our government and we have even EU on top of that.
Yeah, no.
So sovereignty, it's I wouldn't say it's a dream, but something similar. Because nowadays, if you want to take some action or implement some practice, it has to be approved by two entities, and we don't know who they are. So who are these guys seated in Brussels? So and they are that present. That, for instance, in terms of accepting the migrants from Middle East, they want to tell you, yeah, we're going to implement these quotas, and you need to accept at least 500, 1,000, 2,000, regardless of the size of the country, regardless of the GDP of the country, regardless of the culture of the country. So you cannot apply the same policy to every country. We are not just a huge mass block. We are different among us. I think actually we are. I know that Canada and US are very heterogeneous, since you are huge and there are a lot of different behaviors, a lot of different ethics. But here there are even religious differences. So it's very difficult to integrate people coming from, let's say, from Syria, for instance, in Hungary, and it's a bit easier, let's say, in Spain, because if you think about back in time, the Syrians, they were already in Spain, in Portugal, in Italy. Somehow they can relate to that. So that's already a step to welcome those guys there. I mean, I'm not saying that Spain, Portugal, and Italy should just all open their borders, but there is already a factor that somehow the lifestyle is similar. So that tells that this whole policy of the EU of bringing migrants into the territories, it's not so simple. It requires, you know, a lot of work to be done on the background. And when I say that, I'm not defending that we just close our borders and no one is welcome. Actually, my view on that is strong border controls, and we need to know who is coming into our territory. Actually, you mentioned this example of 100 people living or in the same, let's say, apartment or in the same space, whatever. But it can also be used in terms of the migrants. Let's say we are living like 4 guys in the same apartment, and we want to bring someone, I don't know, for a drink, and someone is not very comfortable with this person. So it's not up to me to put this person in the common or in the shared space, in the living room. I just bring the person to my private space, to my bedroom. So that's, in a way, it's the same with how EU is imposing the migrants in our territories. So they can encourage us to receive people. They can give some sort of incentives, but at the end of the day, it has to be each country decision to integrate people, and also the number of people, because we have different resources. We have different possibilities, and I think that's very, very wrong to apply the same pattern in every single territory. I talking about differences. I used to be very, very pro US external politics. Like, I think was a way to combat my communist mindset. Okay, I'll go from white to black, but then sometimes when you go from white to black, you end up defending things that are totally absurd. So I took my time. I stepped back. I detached from my personal feelings, my emotions, whatever, and I realized that what US was doing, it was just applying a model that, in my opinion, it's valid in certain countries, but on others turned out to be a disaster, like Libya. I was very much when US went into Libya and defeated Gaddafi and tried to promote democracy, but as we see, it's not really working. I mean, I wouldn't say that they need a dictatorship, but maybe a strong democracy, or what we call here a democracy with muscles. Someone that they know who is in charge. They know that it's not that simple. But at the end of the day, the guy who is up there, he knows that if he's not doing things ethically or enough ethically, he might be gone. So Again, I think it's very important,
Yeah.
to step back and try to think things from the different
Yeah. Well,
perspective.
you know what? That perfectly goes right in line with, like I say, whether you're talking about, statism, globalism, or any kind of these forced association, or even if you go to religion, just like Nietzsche acknowledged in terms of, oh shit, we killed God. Now what do we got to replace him with? When I want to discuss these ideas, what I should try to reiterate this more often maybe than I do is I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. So as much as I'm not a fan of statism, because I've seen how it can be detrimental and used as a mean of, like I say, divide and conquer, I also recognize that you can't eliminate these things without, to me, like you were even saying with bringing someone into a household. Well, you have to have a culture of people that understand the very concept first of property rights before you can even get into that kind of discussion. So to me, that's what I want to take advantage of, living in the age of information, is let's get as many people as humanly possible up to thinking about these things critically before we start doing these things, whether it's political or has to do with war or interventionism. Because all these things have, as you alluded to, some very negative consequences. Sure, a lot of people, we're convinced, right, that if you just take out Gaddafi, that tyrant, that somehow the Libyan people will all rejoice and it'll just turn into this utopia. Well, that's not what happened, right? There's warring factions now. Just like when people are scared of, if you destroy the state, there will be anarchy, because you're just by eliminating the concept of the state is not eliminating people's evil tendencies. Some people, not all, but some people's, or tendencies to seek out power, right, or authority. That's never going to. So what you need is a culture of people before you even try to topple, whether it's militarily or in the political realm through political action, or in the intellectual realm in terms of talking about philosophy. Is, like I say, you got to lay down the foundation. And until you recognize that you live in a place where you have a healthy culture of people who are willing to accept and adopt more personal responsibility, more sovereignty, then you're not ever going to get anywhere. That, to me, that's the thing. That's why I feel like this is a very long journey that I might not even be alive to be able to see how it unfolds in its reality once it does come to fruition, as I hope it does. But I at least want to be someone that has contributed to the discourse and what it even means today, because that's what I think we have to do. Whether, like I say, whether it's the Libyan example or whether it's central planning in terms of forced association, is we have to figure out ways that allows us, just like with markets, right? Markets work perfectly for that. And all a market represents, a properly free market, is just people's ability to do their own thing, right? As long as they're not using force or violence, as long as it's voluntary, is markets will shift people's mindsets, their cultural habits in terms of their consumption, what they deem as important or worthy or meaningful. These things play a key and pivotal role, but you can't have that. Your legs are chopped off at the knees the minute you've introduced a one-size-fits-all approach, which is what the state tries to represent. Which is why you never get to vote for a multitude of parties where in this county you guys get to do this and this. No, it's always there's this one, whether it's a prime minister or a premier or a president, whatever they want to identify themselves as, that gets to control over large swaths of people that aren't all in unison or all of the same collective mindset. So and it's that forced association, once again, that I got to go back to and reiterate, is that's what's causing the division. And then you bring in today the identity politics into it. And now you're going where people are going right down to that core of their in-group preference. And now they're perceiving people, like you were saying. Listen, I have nothing against Syrian people. I've actually got to do some arguments with some white people that you would think like we should agree with each other on a lot of things. But I look at them and they try to get more like white talk, like white nationalism, because Canada was a country. To me, it's like, do you not realize that the people, like, you're so against government? And I get a kick out of these people because, like, you're pissed off at how the government's treating you. Have you ever looked at what color Justin Trudeau is? Like, right? Guy's white. He's pretty white. So why? But see, they've been taught, and this is the part that I kind of get a little bit upset about, is the ruling class, they know full well, too, because that's the thing. Justin Trudeau and these people, they understood that most Canadians were raised and developed to think completely nationalist, right? Canadians were taught and to think more of in-group preferences, right? When I was going to school, it was a hold your heart, hand over your heart, just like in the American, you pledge your allegiance and all this stuff, and you recite your national anthem. So you teach kids from very early age to be all nationalists, have all this in-group preference, and then as an adult, you completely Yeah, they completely upset the apple cart, and then they try to finger wag at the people that they've taught to be nationalists, right? And tell them how bad they are. Now, me, I won't finger wag at the white nationalists. I'll just say, does it really make sense, right? Is it the skin color? Is it really the skin color that's going to be the determining factor in how free you are? No, it's going to have to do with what's roaming around up in their minds, right? Because like a person, like you were saying, a person from Syria could come to this country and be much more respectful of my sovereignty and my freedom or my individuality than my neighbor. So to me, it's all about ideas. I don't give a crap about the super, but you're not ever going to beat that out of all of humanity. You might get small percentages of populations like you and I that can think outside of that box, but we're still going to have a substantial portion of every population in every geographical area around the world that's still going to have that in-group preference and that tribalist mentality, which is why don't fight it. Allow, like, to me, it's like, could you imagine you have two warring enemies, and your only solution is to keep them stuck, tightly confined in the exact same space? You know what's going to happen in that scenario? Like you're setting up a scenario where there's serious potential for conflict. Whereas if you open the door and let one of them leave, right, and kind of go their own way, or at least not have to be forced to associate, well, they still might not like each other. They still might have preferences. But at least you've reduced or almost eliminated the potential for massive conflict.
Yeah, but as you said, like the real division is not about being white or black or religious or not religious. Is about freedom. Freedom, it's freedom of thinking. If you want to put a line among the human race, is between those who think by themselves and those who don't. This is a real distinction. And actually, what is really scary is that the percentage of people that think by themselves is very few, and the other is immense. And what is even more scary is that people think that they are able or capable to own their own thoughts, and they don't. So there's also a step in between. Some people, they take themselves as free thinkers, and they aren't. Some others, they might acknowledge that they are mental slaves, but they're happy with that. So they are not so scary, you know. Actually, some people are very happy to obey. I believe that there are people who are meant to be less free than others. That's the modus operandi, and that brings to another, that the real work needs to be done, as you stated, in the individual, because we can change the state to stronger or less stronger. We can go to a democracy with muscles that I mentioned, or a democracy without muscles, a democracy with Trudeau socks or without socks. It doesn't matter. The real change needs to be individuals, and that leads to the point I stated before, that people are the mirror of the state. So if you change people, automatically you change state, you change government, because it all goes from the very bottom to the top. So and what we have been trying is to change what is happening in the platform there, and we need to go back to the root cause, which is people. So every time I see people cursing on the government, regardless of the country. So here in Hungary, the viral hate against Donald Trump, against Israel, for instance, if we can go into that topic, I always step back and try to understand how people in that country behave. It's, for instance, I've been in Brazil a few times. You know, and Brazil is known to be a quite corrupted country, but I've seen corrupted actions, you know, in front of my eyes, I'd say 10 times per day. So which example do we give to, you know, to the government? How can you, how can you complain about how the government is behaving when you are the exact same? And actually, even here in Hungary, I can give you another example. My ex-girlfriend, who is really progressive, so but we managed to get along for a while. She had another boyfriend before, who was this social justice warrior, right? So he was, writing articles denouncing some corruption among politicians, you know, among all sorts of figures in the society. And once this guy, he went for drinks with his friends, fair enough. He got drunk, fair enough. Who didn't? And he took his car and started driving home. drunk, and he was caught by the police. And what he did, this social justice warrior, just paid a bribe to the police and went home. And nothing happened to him, and luckily nothing happened to people, because I wouldn't care about him. No, actually, he would deserve to pay the price.
Right.
But at the end of the day, which example is he giving? It's a typical example of what people here in Hungary say when someone preaches water and drinks wine. So
yes.
and you see a lot of that on social justice warriors, a lot of that.
Yeah, for sure. Now, like I say, I kind of got a little bit off topic there, but what I wanted to do is get back to. So you were saying, so you would consider yourself a Zionist. I've kind of, that's one thing that I've superficially kind of glanced over, haven't really delved into it. But if you maybe want to help to explain and expand on what you would perceive of what Zionism represents, the ideals, the principles. Actually, some people are interested in, because you do get a lot of people that talk about, or they use that term quite openly, but a lot of it just seems to be used as a pretense of some kind of anti-Semitism, right? But if you want to just expand on what that means to you, what Zionism means to you, kind of like some of the underlying principles or premises of it, because I'd be interested in hearing that myself.
Yeah, well, it's a quite complex concept, but basically it's the accomplishment or the acknowledgement of the Jewish people to live in the territory that is now Israel. So what is the territory of Israel? Probably that's the most controversial topic. So where the borders should be fixed, who should be allowed to live in Israel, and that's where I think the division is more polemic. So as Israel is now with the current borders, with the current capital, I'm totally fine with that. Actually, I'm not even against the so-called two-state solution if the Palestinians would accept Israel as a neighbor. So that would be the first step. It's impossible to accept a state that has as main intent the destruction of the neighbor. So the first thing we need to make sure is that Palestinian territory is going to be given to people with good intentions, actually looking after their citizens, trying to generate some wealth and not just throw rockets, to kill randomly people in Israel. So that's vital. Now, in terms of capital, I think Jerusalem makes sense as capital of Israel. I think if we move it back to Tel Aviv, it's just a favor to the Arabs, just to make them happy, and it's not accomplishing the whole state of Israel. It's just something incomplete. So it's more of a political concept, okay, we have Israel for Jews, but Tel Aviv will be the capital, so it won't be that let's say that huge for the Arabs, because for me either Israel will be Israel like 100%, or it doesn't make sense to do something that it's half of the project. So I'm very happy to see Jerusalem as capital. I don't think that Jerusalem should be divided in west, east, because I think divisions, walls, they won't make any better. And if we think about for Islam, Jerusalem is not even a major city. If I remember well, the third or the fourth most sacred city. So it's more of an enclave than a meaningful territory.
Yes. Okay. Well, I get what you're saying, actually. So, because I thought there might have been a little bit more to it than that. Because if it's predominantly just that, because I get that. I even, years ago when you hear about the whole Palestinian and Israeli conflict and how long it's been going on, I find that to be it is a very difficult situation for sure. But I would tend to agree with you on the pretense of the two-state solution, because you do have two people that have historical claims to a particular area, but to me it shouldn't be. Now the capital, I guess that's going to be a sticking point of contention. I can kind of I understand that, but it should be an issue, and I think even Trump and the way he's kind of been approaching it seems like it might be potential if you could de-escalate some of the tensions and, like I say, get get some more sovereignty of the individual back to those people, and rather than being so hell-bent on just making a us versus them. I just can't understand how it isn't possible. And that will be maybe one of these litmus tests for the rest of the world is, yeah, if you could show two people from, historical backgrounds that share a lot of similarities, but have some obvious differences, where they can find a solution to that issue in terms of just the geography and their ability to socially coexist peacefully. I think that would that would be a great test case for the rest of the world to maybe try to adopt, because that's what you get is you do have a lot of balkanization that's happening. It's taken place all over the world by the sheer fact of that in-group preference or the tribalist tendencies of most peoples. To me, I'm not one to decide or determine whether one should exist or the other. I believe they're both obviously going to have to find a way to exist, but to me, it's just make it, like I say, make it more about each individual having their freedom. They're given more of those, like the Palestinian people, the Israelis, given more and more freedom to every individual, rather than placing such an overarching emphasis on the state per se. I believe that, like I say, that will break down a lot of barriers. But that I recognize that when you get into people's very, very deeply held religious tendencies, that's difficult. And like I say, I've broken myself out of the mindset, but I liken having that kind of discussion. To me, it's like, it's like me trying to imagine telling my grandmother that the earth isn't 6,000 years old. Boy, that'd be a tough sell, because she's been very much indoctrinated in that mindset for the entirety of her life, and it's so enshrined and so entrenched in her psyche that it'd be a tough. So I understand why they're having that ongoing issue in that particular part of the world. But I feel bad about the situation, because it's not good for either, because you have this constant oppressor or the oppressed narrative. And to me, either side of that's the part that very few people even talk about. When you're talking about the Marxist narrative, or the oppressor versus the oppressed, right? The bourgeois and the proletariat. To me, it's on both sides. Of one, you're pointing out, let's say, the oppressor, right? You're pointing them out as being evil, authoritarian, vile and despicable. But on the other side of it, it's not much better for the class that you're claiming to be the oppressed, because now you're talking about them as if they're weak, meager, incapable, incompetent, unwilling, or lack the ability to defend themselves, inferior in some way. Both of that is I can't imagine raising my kids with either pretense. And a society, like when you're talking about the state or society, you're basically talking a smaller structure, just like a family type setting. And like I say, in any kind of societal or family type setting or structure, given one side or one group or one individual the pretense that they have all the power and the other person are just helpless victims, it's detrimental to both of them.
Yeah, but if you think about Israel, it's a good example of a country with freedom. So in terms of elections for a party to get into government, they always need to get majority. It's a must. So either you get this 50%, or you cannot become government. So most of the times they end up doing alliances afterwards, and you see a government constituted by 5, 6, because there are thousands of parties in Israel. Actually, that goes in line with the Jewish joke that there are, every time there are two Jewish people, there are 3 opinions. So here we go.
I like that. Yeah.
There's no such country where people confront each other, people tell what they think, people argue. It's just I would say it's the engine of the country. That's the even joke that why did the Messiah not show up to the Jews? Because it's very hard to tell them what to do and what to think. There are people who think by themselves. Who want to take that role?
Yeah.
It's mission impossible. And I think that also explains why for Bibi to get elected, there were 3 rounds. 3 rounds,
Yeah.
3 elections in 1 year. That tells how difficult it is to get into a consensus, which, okay, in a way it might sound scary, but another way, it tells that you need to be, really strong to make sure that people are with you. So to get there, to get into the government, there is a lot of work. It's not just about knowing the right people or having the most beautiful face or the most profound tone of voice. No, it's really, really network job. So it's impressive, and that's a totally different image comparing what's going on in the Palestinian Authority or so-called West Bank. Not even want to mention Gaza, because they, especially the progressives, they used to paint Israel as an apartheid, and Israel has 20% of Arabs living in the territory.
Right.
So that's a lot, and among the political parties with more MPs, the third, it's an Arab party. They got, if I'm not mistaken, 15 MPs, and Bibi got around 30. So where is the apartheid? And then if you ask how many Jews and Christians are living in the neighbor countries, I think we can count with my hands. Maybe.
Oh, really?
With yours, yeah. if they're still around. So here we go. It's I mean, we really need to rethink. I mean, I'm not saying that Israel is not doing anything wrong or is totally innocent. There are things that I think they could take it differently, and maybe it will speed up the process. I think the war is there for a reason. People are taking benefits from both sides, and that's very, very, very sad. There should be some real peace plan in process, even from the Israelis, and of course, real people are interested in that, but there are some guys taking advantage. So what we need to do is make sure that these guys are not, taking benefits of the conflict, because at the end of the day, when you see someone losing their life, it's not a politician, it's not the top guys in the army, it's people like me and you. So who suffers, it's always the working class, and you don't need to be leftish or rightish for that. And that's one thing I really struggle with the left, is they think they're the only one who stands for the working class. All the others are just people that want to steal them. They want to use them as slaves, and it's not that simple. I think whoever is with good intentions, whoever is interested in making sure that the wealth is well distributed, or there are opportunities for everyone, doesn't need to be leftish or rightish. It's about justice, and I think justice is a complex concept to be only owned by a part of the political spectrum.
Yes. Well, and when it comes to that, especially for me in particular, because I do come from a blue collar background, that's basically I spent my whole life in the blue collar fields. But because I do my videos and stuff, I try to look professional and stuff. People perceive me as being, more of just an ultra capitalist and, right winger or something. But to me, it's the beautiful thing about removing the pretense of the state, especially in terms of economics, although I would say social as well, but economics is usually what they claim right wingers to be, uncaring, unthinking. They hate the working class. They just see profits around every corner, right? And to me, actually, no. And that's why I constantly promote the fact and rail against the cronyism, the corporate cronyism that happens, the bailouts of the banks, the bailouts of the corporation, because to me, that's actually what's destroying, the power of the working class. Now, even in terms of wages, now I rail against mass immigration, but not because of the people that are coming here because I have anything against those people. But what I look at it is, in a pool of anything, right? If you want to devalue, like labor in Western Canada or in Western countries such as Canada has basically been stagnant for 4 decades, basically almost as long as I've been alive. Every time wages increase because of central planners and their ability to print the money, devalue the purchasing power of the currency. Well, the inflation that keeps staying ahead and above. Nobody's getting their heads not getting above water. The working class is not getting their heads above water, because every time, even if they're on the minimum wage and they get that mandatory minimum wage increases through government, the minute there's an increase, well, then, you know, the corporate class or the ruling class, the taxing class or the corporate class realize, oh, look, there's a little bit more that I can take, that they can skim off the top from the working class. So nobody's getting any further ahead. And to me, just like I would never want the workers to take over the means of production. If someone created their own business, I'm not for communism where the workers rise up and take over, because no, they have to respect the fact that someone started that. But on the flip side of that, I would say no corporation should have the ability to use government as a means to suppress wages, or not just for the fact, because that's the other thing that people get confused. It's not just the fact that people that are coming from other countries, because like I say, it wouldn't matter if it was even Ireland. Let's say they were even coming from Ireland. Forget about Syria, because to me, it's not about skin color. It's about if there's a finite, or if there's a value placed on labor, right? And let's say you have 100 laborers in a particular jurisdiction. Well, the market's going to figure out what the value of that labor represents. But if you go from 100 people in that labor pool, now you've increased that labor pool to 1,000, arbitrarily, mind you, not because of demand, but arbitrarily through, you know, immigration. Doesn't matter how competent. I'm not measuring the competence or the abilities or skills of any of the people, whether they're domestic or come from someone else. I'm saying now you've increased that pool tenfold, right? And now the value of the labor for each individual has decreased just by you know, the law of supply and demand. So once again, but a lot of people that talk about being against immigration, what I've found, and I've had to disassociate myself with some of these people, is they aligned with me, but they were more concerned about who was coming, right? To me, and that's where it makes me, I'm much more of a friend to the typical labor or the working class than most of these left-wingers. These bleeding heart left-wingers are saying, oh, we should have open borders, because to me, it's like, wait a minute, don't you care about, you know, these people that are working on the lower end of the social economic scale already struggling to make ends meet, and now you want to flood it so they're actually doing even worse? You're causing harm to those people, right? Not that I got anything. To me, the best approach would be, whether it's Syria, Ireland, or Libya. To me, it's like, no, let's not flood, you know, our jurisdictions. Let's figure out what best we can do. Maybe we can help give them information. Maybe they can adopt some of the knowledge or technology or things where they can better their own goddamn countries. To me, it's like, why would you even want? To me, it's like, especially some of these countries. Well, South American countries are a perfect example. It's like, yeah, why the hell would you want to leave a place like Mexico? Can be a beautiful place. Brazil could be a beautiful place. No, we don't all want to congregate to one jurisdiction. No, you should make it so that these people can create their own, you know, forms of freedom, where they can better themselves in their own countries and better their own. That's the beautiful thing about online too, is you could be in Syria today. You could be an online, you know, as long as the government doesn't have the ability to shut down your access to the internet, you could be a YouTuber in Syria getting paid in American money. Wow, right? That's big time money. You don't have to bring them to this country. You could help them out. And you know what? If you help them out in their own country, they're going to be able to help out other people in their community. So you're helping. To me, if you want to be a bleeding heart leftist, right, then do it in a manner that you're not pretending that. Because what I found a lot of these leftists is they think they're like some maniacal word where people are just pawns on a chessboard and they can just move them around however they see fit. They don't seem to recognize that they're the ones that are speaking from a place of authority. They pretend that and even when you hear them, when they talk about, like, down the States with the Democrats, black people have to vote. Like, that sounds so like, you're talking down. Like, you're trying to treat an entire culture of people, or entire group of people, entire demographic, and you're trying to pretend that they all think and act the same way. That's very racist as far as I'm concerned.
It is. And it is really decreasing their value. That let's give them the ability to vote, because they can also have a view, and they also know what's happening. So they are taken for granted that there was some intellectual issue with them, and all of a sudden they got the enlightenment. So, you know, those premises are very, very racist, and that also tells that they are putting the skin color or the religious background ahead of the individual. So they would really help a Syrian or an Afro-American, and they wouldn't give a shit about a white person. That's why I mean, I don't want to stick with the white supremacists, because I think they can be very, very nasty, you know. So they're not really the most Zionist, for instance. But well, on the other hand, I think there is no more neglected individual today than someone who is white, heterosexual, and Christian. You know, it's like they will send you to a museum. What's wrong with you? You know, actually, once I can tell you a story. I was on a weekend in Madrid, and I met one of my friends, a Spanish guy who happens to be Jewish as well, and he's gay. He's openly gay, and he knows I have. Why should I have an issue with that? I mean, it's not even a question. So I met him and his friends, and they were all homosexual. So we were in a bar, and there was a girl passing by, and she grabbed my attention, and one of the guys just asked me, but are you not gay? And I said, no, I'm not. And he asked me, why? But why should I explain? Like there was something wrong with me. I mean, there's not something wrong with me, and there's not something correct with me. It's only a choice. And what really pissed me off, that we need to justify our choices. Why is that? If it's just a preference. So if I have this sexual preference, or this meal preference, or if I prefer cats than dogs, or the other way around, it doesn't matter. I'm entitled to my choices. Yes. Until the point I don't want to impose my choices on others. That's the thing. So there's nothing more dangerous for the freedom of the individual than someone that wants to convert you. And that's what more and more we see coming back to the beginning of the conversations, that the new religious mindset is on the atheistics, on the people that on the Marxists. They behave in a way that they want everybody to be the same. So and there will be no diversity that they are so interested in. If they keep pushing for that behavior, for those values, so where would be the rainbow? Not here, for sure. So I see a lot of contradictions, on this speech, and what is more scary is not only the contradictions, is that they own the mass media, and the youngsters, people who are now, in college or even high school. That's what they get. And we know people. Then most of us, we don't have it's not our case, but most of humanity, we don't have this capacity to question what we receive, and we will acknowledge whatever we hear, regardless of the source. And if these people stay in charge, it's going to be very scary, because you cannot even come up with with something that is considered old-fashioned. It's almost like a crime. And some old-fashioned things are very wrong. I'm not defending all the old-fashioned stuff, because then if I go with this speech, people would think that I would only stick for the traditional marriage. I would be against abortion. Actually, look, I'm totally in favor of gay marriage. I'm in favor of abortion. I'm in favor of euthanasia. And then if I say I'm Zionist, people say, how is it possible? I mean, why not? Why is not compatible? It's either you are part of a package, or there is something wrong with you. So you need to follow the pattern. That's what really I think we need to combat, is that there are no patterns. There are human beings who have the freedom to decide in every single issue.
Right. Actually, there was something when you sent me your quick, short little bio in the message. There was something you put at the end, and I kind of jumped out at me. you included another descriptor for yourself. Maybe you want to expand on that, but you basically suggest that you would consider yourself a hedonist.
I do. I think I put myself as an old-fashioned hedonist. So, okay, it's a rhetorical title, and the idea, of course, is also to grab attention from people. I just noticed I got from you, and but the idea is to combine, this bon vivant, mindset and at the same time keep some old-fashioned vows or some more, some more rightish or traditional rightish mindset, because we have the idea of that the guy who is into pleasure, regardless of it's women or drinking, it's also very progressive and wants to rebel against whatever is established, and it's not that simple. Actually, my whole idea is to transmit a message that we can combine things that are told to be in different sectors, so we can bring all together. So you can be, someone who enjoy life, but sometimes responsible, values dignity, and actually that's how I would like to come back with to come up with something for men.
Well, I just to clarify, so because I'm pretty sure I get what you're saying. So I'm all for people's their subjective pretense in terms of their own, like you say, pursuits of pleasure, right? So and as long as it fits within the paradigms of not aggressing against other people, you're not using force or violence or theft. I'm totally with it. But I would suggest, and I can't help but think you probably trying to connect both a little bit together. But on the other side of pleasure, which is obviously a very worthy goal or pursuit of humans, we all enjoy pleasure. There's a reason why we can have the capacity to experience pleasure, right? It's not by accident. But on the other flip side of that, with me now personally, it's kind of like a balancing act. Is I love some hedonistic pleasures myself, but I would also say that I think maybe with even a little bit heightened emphasis in comparison to the pleasures is the purpose and meaning. So I'm sure you must agree that humans is not just what pleases us, but something that also brings a sense of meaning or purpose in our life as well, right?
Okay. That's what I would like to to gather together. That pleasure, it's not just this stupid idea of fooling around, but it can be something meaningful. So it's something more. I wouldn't say superior, but can be something so sublime.
Right.
Sublime, actually. Yeah.
Yes. Well, that to me, because even people, like I say, because when I hear that terminology, some people use it in obviously in a pejorative manner, right? Because and I don't now. If I was around my religious family, the religious side of my family, I should say, and brought up that term hedonism, that's because of the way they're taught it. Oh, you're supposed to forsake all pleasures of the flesh and all, and not to be tempted by. And I get that it's a kind of sense of purism. But a lot of those people that deny themselves some of the pleasures of life that come with aspects that aren't all entrenched in morality or ethics, to me, they can be a little bit too uptight, a little bit too closed-minded and too closed off. So it's that balancing act for me. Is I don't like people that are too ultra orthodox or conservative to the point where they deny any pleasures, but at the same time, I also don't think I'd necessarily want to live in a society where that's basically all we are meant to do is to consume, right? Yes. And seek pleasures of the flesh. I don't think that would be a very well-adapted society that I would want to live in. Anyways, to me, that's why there has to be some overarching meta narrative or grand narrative or goal that we can kind of come together, as individuals, but as groups, as individuals, but all come together as groups or collectives and unify under one grand thing, which is to bring about meaning, right? And into people, a sense of meaning. And that's one thing that I will say that I'm real having a hard time, even though I'm all about the scientific method. I'm completely into the realm of objective logic and consistent and reasoned arguments and all those. But at the same time, just like a lot of people, not just Nietzsche before, but even people like Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris and a few others now are even starting to recognize, and Brett Weinstein, as well as we have to leave something there for the grand narrative of us humans having a goal and a purpose. It can't just be by the utilitarian aspect of humanity, because that's actually what separates us from the state of nature. Is we're not just going out we're not just here to eat and procreate and then die,
Yeah.
right? Surely that can't be what defines what it is to be human beings. So I don't know where that's going to come from. I think actually one of the great things that happened while I was growing up, and I was kind of hoping that would translate and transition into a new form of secular ethics, but it doesn't seem to have gone that way. But like I say, whereas religion was kind of falling on the wayside when I was growing up, as far as being dominant in the culture in your community, it seemed to me that Hollywood in particular, but those who represent the arts like movie, music, television, were kind of taking up that mantle and creating the same kind of morals and ethics and principles, but using it in different stories. So,
Yeah.
Braveheart, right? Like this, the story of the guy that's defending he just wants to have his land, be with his wife, raise some kids. So it's told in different stories. It wasn't done through the Bible, but now we're seeing even Hollywood has vacated that space.
Yeah.
People that are in music nowadays seems to be the dominant cultures of music now it is pure hedonism, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's actually, I think is somewhat being detrimental because people are now seeking, which is why even Jordan Peterson said, I can't believe people want to come listen to me drum on for hours and hours. But that just goes to show you that most people's tanks are almost empty in terms of that goal of meaning or purpose.
Yeah, and it's actually impressive the amount of people that are attending, to these sessions where Jordan Peterson is going. It's all he became almost like a rock star. It's there is such a hunger for for philosophical conversations, for meaningful topics that I think we never experienced. I'd say it's related to people are more and more isolated, so they kind of question what's going on. I don't have the chance to talk to, so that's why I think he steps in. Look, my girlfriend she's a psychologist, and most of our clients are men. On the beginning, I was a bit concerned with that. How come? Maybe the guys go to see you. I was a bit concerned with that, but then she told me that what's happening is women most of the time they have someone to talk to. There's always a female friend, a girlfriend that we have a chat with her. For us, what will be, let's say, first we have less friends than women. That's the thing. We have, let's say, 5 friends. They have 15, so it's already a bad start. And from these 5, how many of them would be willing to talk to us when we are, on a real need, to share something that is just immense, something that is just overwhelming us. Most of the guys would say, okay, let's have a drink. It's going to be solved. Let's watch some sports, something, and they won't sit and talk to. So that also reflects how more and more people are isolated. I think, especially men, because there is less and less people around, and if not, others are busy, with either with work or with a mobile phone.
Yes,
and that also I think reflects how Jordan Peterson and all these guys you mentioned are getting more and more popular, and I think this platform that we just joined can really help us, to get to know others, and and to be in touch with people that can understand us, and we can pass a message and get something back, and not just getting into meaningless places.
Yes, exactly. No, I and like I said, I'm enjoying this discussion. Now, we kind of get sidetracked, but that's the way that I love these discussions anyways, because it's kind of, I like a discussion that's fluid. It's not, we could predict, I could have point by point, but I just like it to kind of go where it's going. I'm not so worried about being particular to stick on topic, but I do kind of want to get back a little bit because we started down the road or the venture of your journey. But I would suggest, or based on what I've heard so far, so would you have considered yourself, I guess, probably when you were younger, because you were a Marxist, so you were obviously much more, I guess, on that left side of the political spectrum. Unfortunately, like I say, I hate the left or right, but that's how people are taught to think about things. But today, where would you find yourself, like, whether you want to talk about the political spectrum? I guess predominantly because based on how you're talking about, you seem to be someone that totally accepts, like, everything what I've heard so far. So I would assume you accept ownership, right, and property rights and the non-aggressive. So to me, it's like you fit all the descriptors of what it would be to be a libertarian, but politically, I guess, because libertarian, you can break libertarianism down to just the political realm, but in reality, libertarian is it's a philosophical endeavor, right? It's
lifestyle,
right? It's more than just picking a because that's the point of having the premise. Like other than like an anarchist, and I have lots of friends that identify as anarchists because they reject the state, they recognize the inherent immorality and impossibility of legitimacy of the state. The problem is though, a lot of people that would identify as anarchists that still identify on that left side is they still leave that vacuum, that void where there's nothing. Okay, so you're against the state. I'm totally on board with you're against the state. You're against the.
I'm not actually. I'm not. First, I don't think there is a pattern that we can apply in every single country. There are cultures where the presence of the state is needed, sometimes into a larger extent. So I'm not here defending the idea that we need to just get rid of the state. Actually, I think that the state it's somehow vital. So what is really important is that we are free, and I think we can only get freedom through some discipline and to some practices. So because we think this modern concept of freedom is just do whatever you want, and it's much more complex than that.
Yes.
So I think if we know what we want, or if we know what we don't want, and we have a sort of schedule or a sort of agenda, we can navigate around, a way more efficient than just falling here, falling there, and going without any direction. So I think more than the state, what I would be more interested in improving is the individuals. Because as I stated before, if we manage to change ourselves, somehow or sooner, we're going to change the state or the government or whatever we call it. So the main audience or the main people I would like to talk to is not politicians, but people. Because actually talking to politicians, it's most of the time it's a waste of time. They are dumb. They don't know they don't know for what they stand for. I mean, I know what they stand for. They stand for their pocket, and I can understand them. I mean, but they are not there. Let's say 100%. They are not. Most of the times, they are just performing a role or covered under a certain mask. So I'm not interested to talk to them. So at the end of the day, what is important is this freedom. So I'm all for free speech. So I think we need to be able to talk our minds and also own our minds. I mean, it's not only about expressing ourselves, but knowing who is there, and to know our minds. We also need to somehow step back from ourselves, because it's very easy to question, the neighbor, to question you, to question my father, whatever, but to question ourselves, to develop what Peterson calls this sort of judge that will be here.
Yes.
That's a life changing. If you develop this ability of having someone around you, that might give you some awards, or even not only awards, but also applaud you on recognize you when you are doing well, that will accomplish, when you are on track. I think that's the most important task, because then politicians or whatever people are on the government, they're gonna have to deal with people differently, because if they see that people are free, they cannot be the assholes they are nowadays. They need to somehow go into a different strategy. So at the end of the day, I think the focus should be on people, and then this mirror effect will do the job.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Culture is the driver. You have to change the culture. To me, just changing politicians around. That's like the old expressions, like trying to move the chairs around on the Titanic as it's sinking. Not going to help you out much, right? No, you definitely have to affect the culture. And like I say, how that's going to happen going forward. Well, that's one area that, like I say, I'm surprised. I don't know if it's because of there's so many gatekeepers that have so much control over social media and like historical, like the establishment media or like radio and television. But I do see a serious lack these days of these great grand stories and meta narratives, like I was saying, that would be greatly affecting the culture of our country in a manner that Westerners are basically well adapted to, right? So if you want to get your morals and ethics and you don't want to send your kids to church and you recognize that the state's is failing them, then you need cultural drivers. And like I say, movies, music, television, every one of our kids, they all consume these things. So to me, why is it like that's the part that's most disturbing to me is, well, I guess what it is there isn't an economic. See, that's the thing under a capitalist system is, how do you make it economically viable? And that's something actually Eric Weinstein, Brett's brother, and he's a really smart guy. I'm not sure if you know who he is. He works for Peter Thiel Capital, which is a libertarian from Silicon Valley. He was one of the first guys that started up of PayPal. He was one of the first investors into Facebook. And basically, like, he's kind of question this whole thing too, is I think what it is right now, and I think one of the biggest problem might very well be, is how the internet come to exist once it truly opened up. Mm-hmm. And how it come to exist was we went through historically is most of us in the West, everything was like consumer driven, and it was and that's how it affected our psyche, our culture, and was the drivers for our consumable, for what we consume, was the economics of it. Now, once social media came online and everyone was thinking, okay, this is going to be our moment. I think the reason why that failed is because the way it was introduced was on more of a value-free premise. And that's what I was trying to get to when I was talking about earlier, when someone was commenting before, when you were trying to figure out your thing, is money, capitalism. One thing about money is it represents a value, and we all have to place a value on ourselves, the product of our labor and our intellect. But because social media is done where everything is free, although it's not free, you know, there's an actual exchange because they're getting your data, which is very, very valuable. But because no one had to have skin in the game, and there wasn't an automatic instinctive economic transaction that had to take place, we are really stuck in a world now where it's like we went to some kind of socialist experiment and we're trying to get back, because we recognize that you need capitalism, you need proper incentive structures, incentive structures to drive us in proper paths, because we lack those incentive structures. And because now, like, it probably wouldn't be very profitable, because obviously large portions of the population are against promoting libertarianism, or maybe actually there's a vacuum or a void that really could be filled and people could be making billions of dollars right now, but people are just too scared or cowardly to do it. I like I say, I can't figure it out, but I think that, to me, especially for the West, because like I say, historically in the 20th century is radio, television, and now things such as video or podcast, because we are very much avid consumers of that kind of content through those kinds of mediums. Why aren't the drivers of our culture taking advantage? Well, some of them are, but they're the wrong people that are now seem to be the ones that are taking over the wheel of influence in Western cultures and society. But I believe once they've figured out the economic modeling situation, where we can get back to more pay to play, where we actually have to opt in, and that's the beautiful thing about ThinkSpot, is we actually have to pay to get on that platform. So you actually have to so I think this is a great first step and a foundation for where we might start heading more in that direction, because I think that is very important. If people believe that they have skin in the game and they have to place value on that stuff, I believe that's going to raise and elevate people, and you're going to see a much better kind of person as a result of that.
It's a filter, actually. It's a filter. The fact that you have to pay to be in the platform, it already push back thousands of potential users. While Facebook and most of these social media, they will provide you what I would call fake freedom. That they use, as you said, they use our data, which is the most valuable thing that we own. Actually, I would say that data is the new currency. Instead of cash, is data. Data is all. Like, if you wanna destroy somebody's life, you just use their data, put it online, and the person will be done, will never get a job in their life.
Yes.
Like before, we used to blackmail politicians or decision makers with cash. Now we just tell, look, if you don't sign this contract here, I have a video of you abusing a child. And the person never did that, was the most innocent, human being in the whole universe. But somehow with the technology, we can create a video where whoever person we want to get rid of, we put him in the same bed as a child, and that's it. So that's it in terms of career. That's it in terms of family. That's it in terms of everything. The person is done by all means. So this data is more and more, vital for one to survive, and it's a big risk to, on one hand, is a big risk to put ourselves, out there, but on other is the way that we can combat how things are. So, it's very difficult how to set up in the combat, because if you step back, we allow things to continue as they are. If we get into the platform, we might be able to change, but we might be able to be defeated. So either we consent silently, or we go into the game and we might get wounded, or we might, change it a little bit. But I believe that if we can change a little bit, it's already an achievement. Like when I was younger, I used to be, I want to leave a legacy to the civilization. But I think that's part of being young and idiot. Now I'm happy that when I meet someone that I didn't see for years, the person reminds me something I told him, and that thing made his life better, or made him think about topics that he never questioned. So if we can, through social media, to conversations face to face, whatever is the methodology, if we can have an impact, and actually today I think it's very easy to have an impact, since everything is accessible. Like we are now having a conversation. If there was no ThinkSpot, probably I would say 0.1% we will never talk to each other. That's amazing. And sometimes we curse on on the internet or on social media, and or we curse on Google, for instance. And actually I did, but if I count the times that Google Maps helped me when I was traveling to find a bloody hotel and I didn't stay under the rain, I'll be here till tomorrow. So we can always, we need to be grateful for what social media gave, but same time not forget what are the threats, because again, people will take one side that this social media is a cancer, this social media is the savior. Maybe it's the savior and the cancer at the same time. Maybe among the cancer there is some savior elements, and maybe more, and vice versa. So again, I think what we tend to do is to reduce the situations that are quite complex to a very simple puzzle, and it's not like that. Things are way more difficult to understand than they seem. Even the most simplistic landscape. And what is really scary is that we are being told tons of information. We don't even read more than the first paragraph, and we think we own the history of civilization. Nowadays, everybody is an expert in every topic. It's impressive. Everybody knows about everything. I found very amusing that all of a sudden people are never talked about, I don't know, about UK politics. They have a clear view on Brexit, and they've never been in the UK. They don't even know how the referendum happened. They don't know how when the EU started, how did it change? Nothing. But somehow they know either that they have to leave as soon as possible, otherwise the country will be gone, or they are exiting EU because they become a racist country. And it's only slogans from both sides. people think they know about. I usually say that there is a lot of information, but there is this little of knowledge. This is knowledge, this is information. It's it's a huge discrepancy.
That's the beauty. That's both the beauty and the detriment of the internet. Is yes, we've been given a gigantic, an enormous mountain of information, but yes, like you say, that mountain of information is a lot of disinformation, a lot of bad information with that, I guess, just like a needle in a haystack. There is that needle in a haystack of that good information, but it's up to you to figure out, to find that information, right? You still got to weed through a lot of information, but I tend to agree with you in terms of the social media. I myself have even cursed some of these social media platforms when they changed up, especially YouTube, when they changed their algorithms up. And I know for me personally, it definitely affected my channel. But to me, if I go back now, would I want to change the fact to me, I kind of understand. And these are guys with like some really big brains that come up with the ideas of these companies. So I understand where for them to make these platforms possible and have the potential, the growth potential that they actually did see, is the reason why they did that is they had to do it in that free manner. So at least it gave us the option. Now, I'll say there was quite a trade-off, but I think I'd still be willing today, even if I could go back 10, 12 years, let's say, I think I'd still make that same trade-off, because at the end of the day, the information at least is all out there. There's good and bad and everywhere in between, but at the end of the day, everybody has equal, pretty much, if you got an internet connection, which most people do, especially even in some of the emerging countries, like in Africa, there's a lot of places where you have internet, and with Elon putting Starlink up there soon, everyone in the whole globe is going to have access to the internet. So I'm very thankful that we have it. But like I say, now that all that information is out there, now that the foundation has been laid, I think this is a great time. And I think it's actually happening at the right time where we're going to have to find ways to, like I say, make things where we can set up our own parameters, our own rules of engagement for each other based on our own individuality, once again, rather than us all have to sacrifice to the altar of Facebook per se. I'm glad Facebook came to exist. I met a lot of great people. I'm glad YouTube is here. But yes, now we can have options. And the beautiful thing about options is now you have alternative methods to do the same kind of things that we're doing. So I wouldn't want to eliminate these platforms, because without platforms such as Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, well, the New York Times, the Washington Post, right? Like these are our prior thought leaders, and everything that was taught to us prior, what we were supposed to, our gatekeepers, our narrative gatekeepers, as Eric likes to use the term, is now we have these options. Now they've broken down the paradigm. Now there has been disruption. So the disruption had to take place. That was a needed thing. That was a necessity that had to happen. But like I say, now I think is the point where we have to find a way that's more suitable and more depth for people. Because like, to me, ThinkSpot, like I'll go on Twitter. The main reason why I use Twitter is because it's really quick. The feed is really fast because you're only allowed to put so many characters. So I'm not going there in terms of getting in-depth knowledge, but if I want to have access to a lot of different feeds in real time, real quick succession, Twitter's a great platform for that. But would I ever want to engage in genuine dialogue on a platform such as Twitter? No. But the beautiful thing about ThinkSpot is not just the fact that it's a social media platform, but I also know because it's set up based on the, you got to pay to play model. Now there's going to be a completely different kind of group of people who are going to gravitate to that. So that's that competing model now that'll show what do you want. You want to go watch a B-rated movie at an old drive-in where half the screen is missing, or do you want to go watch a wicked 4K film? Right. So now we'll have these options. And now, like I say, there will be a natural hierarchy that will take place in terms of competence, and people have the right, but that'll happen because the market, those of us, the consumers of the content, will gravitate, and we'll see, because that's why we understand today why there's one restaurant you can walk in, they can charge you $100 for a plate of fish and vegetables, right? Whereas another place they might only be able to charge 10. But that's the thing, we see the difference, and that's what these new upcoming platforms are going to do, are going to give us a better understanding, or get back to the understanding of a hierarchy of competence, because that's what's lacking on these social media platforms. What kind of like what you were alluding to, where everyone thinks that they're they're all geniuses, they all know it all, and because everyone believes that simultaneously, nobody knows what the hell anyone knows, really. Right?
Yeah, people. It's funny how people take themselves so seriously. There are people who are convinced that they're the prophet. They should go to Israel and try to be the Messiah. Probably they will change mind. Pretty soon. And I found very entertaining. How people are so sure. About what they state, and they claim to be that original. And actually, it's a great way to become humble, when you have the opportunity to confront with others, because in a way you see that there are this large amount of idiots, and you are somehow, let's say, satisfied with yourself, okay, that I don't belong to that crowd. But on others, you see there's a lot of people out there, who are capable to think by themselves. You might agree with them in some topics, some others don't. And as I said, then there are options, and you can go into the tribe, and that somehow reflects the person you are, and that's how I think how tribes should be created, like real communities of people who are able to think, respect the differences, and again, don't make without making a big deal out of this. Diversity of ideas, or the diversity of whatever. Just take it as granted. So if there are 10 people, then there might be 10 different skin colors, 10 different opinions. It's because there are two human beings, so there's nothing to vow on that, but today we make this as something that democracy brought, but no, it's just 10 people together. No more than that, But anyway, this is used, I think, for political strategy, to tell others how nice you are, because I think we live in a time that it's you are better if you are liked. So it's about, okay, I got 1,000 likes, I have all these people following me. Does that upgrade you as a human being? I'm not sure. I'm kind of skeptical when I see someone who is surrounded, by a cult. I always question, how honest is this person? How is he, telling what he thinks, or is just playing a game? Of course, there are exceptions, but it's very hard to keep yourself up there with that amount of supporters if you don't sell yourself this little bit. So when people get and again, when people get into this stage that they are so appreciated and they get the rewards, if they want to keep honesty, it's a huge challenge.
That's exactly, that's perfectly. And after we're done here, I'll probably start tied up, because we've got at least 2 hours now of talking, because 45 minutes was trying to figure it out. But yeah, well, I'll just use even my own personal subjective experience growing up. Is you're absolutely right. I found when I was most popular, and would have been my teens and 20s, was when I was willing to sacrifice mostly of what I would be to the lowest common denominator that fit in with the largest amount of the group. Right. So there was never any discussion of ideas or even major events. It was always conversations were taken down to the level where nobody could possibly get offended from each other. You're constantly, seemingly always wanting to agree with each other. As an adult, I realize now that those were the times where, sure, I was popular, but I wasn't being me. I wasn't being true to myself in any way. I was just trying to fit in. And yes, it works. But yeah, maybe that's now it's not an exact science, but yeah, maybe now that is something to depend on how popular the people are. Maybe you want to use that as your litmus test. How true are they? How true are they to themselves? Right? Because, like you say, even the winner. I've used this before too. Even the winner in a race or in any competent challenge of any, there's only going to be one. Right? That's. One is the loneliest number. And if you are at the top in terms of competence or anything, or sticking to anything that has to do with principles, you're almost always going to be subject to being, the single individual or in the minority, because the majority usually is, like I say, that race to the lowest common denominator. The reason why large groups of people can all get together at the Toronto or the Rogers Center and watch the Toronto Maple Leafs is because they're not thinking about anything important other than who wins that game. And chances are most of them all agree that it should be the Leafs that win that game. So there's not much in terms of thinking that's bringing them together. It's just the fact that they share a common goal of watching a particular team win a game. So there's not much that's being learned there other than in-group or tribalism. Whereas, people that are willing to sacrifice their popularity to talk about things like we're talking about, that kind of shows a certain kind of self resolve and ability to not just play the popularity contest, but that you're actually trying to do, whether you're doing it competently or whether you're honest with yourself or not, that'll be shaken out in due time. But at the very least, I think, like I say, my own personal experience, the more popular I was, today I'm actually way less popular than I ever was when I was trying to placate everyone and be someone that was a mirror reflection of them to themselves, because that was what it was most of the time. I had to try to mirror what they wanted to see of themselves in myself. If I could do that for them, they could show solidarity with me. But the minute I challenged them, like if I challenged them on anything that I disagreed with, and all of a sudden I'm a bad guy, or right? So I get exactly what you're saying in terms of that.
And I'm sure you don't regret changing, because when you are popular, it doesn't mean necessarily that people are listening to you. They were just acknowledging you, and somehow it was helpful that you were there. That was the only reason. But so I usually say that you don't want to be popular, you want to be respected. And to be respected, when you are respected, I'm sure people are going to listen to you. Either they agree or not, then it is a different question. But if you are confident and you can transmit the message that you stick it to yourself, people will open their ears and listen to you. And I can tell that by my own experience. The more that I express myself, the more I get to people to listen to me, and that's at the end of the day what matters. So it's I think it's more important to have 5,000, let's say, people now watching this podcast, and paying attention, than having 2,000 that are just there because they want to be seen there, and it's going to sound nice, or they're making a favor to someone else. And because they can tell some people that were listening to an intellectual conversation, but they don't even know what was it about. So I'd rather have 5,000, and maybe there are some people who are anti-Semitic. I don't care, but at least they came into the picture, and perhaps if this out of these 5,000, perhaps 100 are going to change their mind, are going to think about it. So if you listen, if you are listening, at least we have the chance to shake people's mind. If you don't, it's like talking to a wall, So what's the point? What's the point to be popular to 1,000 walls? You better talk to 5,000 people, no?
Yes, I agree. And actually, as a consequence of losing my popularity, which was fine, like I say, and I totally accepted that, and I made that choice willingly. But I've also noticed the benefit of that is, yes, I don't have let's say the 1,000 people that consider me popular just by sheer fact that I'll say what they want to say or what they want to hear. But the people that do, let's say I've lost 1,000, but I've retained 100, that 100 are of much, much higher quality than the 900 that I lost. So to me, that's once again, that's a benefit, in which is doesn't just benefit me, but if it benefits everyone else, because now I'm surrounding myself with people of higher competence, of higher morals and ethics, and they help in turn raise and elevate me because I am a human. I have that instinctive, not just curiosity, but that competitive spirit, especially as a man. I want to, if someone's raising and elevating me by challenging my ideas, which is what has happened in the past, which is why I am today, I'm very grateful and thankful to them rather than being resentful. That's the thing. Some people, they get new information and they get that cognitive dissonance. Now, I think we all kind of go through that maybe initially, because it's hard to be broken free from something that you thought meant or represented the world. Once you've had that paradigm broken, it's tough. But it takes real character, real resolve, and real strength for someone to say, you know what, I'm grateful. Actually, I'm better off. Like there's some people back in the day that I argued with on the internet because I was on the wrong side of the argument, where I might forget their names today, but if I ever ran across them, I'd say, thank you for breaking me free from that stupid crap that I had roaming around in my head. And thank you for making me think about these things. And I really appreciate you doing so. And that's kind of what I'm hoping these conversations are going to do, not just for me and you, but for the people that are going to watch them as well. I really thank you for coming on here, Vitor. And if you ever want to do it again, you just let me know. Because like I say, someone like yourself, and especially someone that's interested in ideas and talk with these things, I'm always willing to do so.
Yeah, that would be great. I mean, hopefully next time I won't have to go through all these internet issues or whatever it is.
Yeah, no, it should be good once you get it set up the first time. Usually that they should be good after that.
Actually, I've checked afterwards, and before I got into the podcast, there was a message suggesting me to be near the router, but I don't know what is the relation between that. And I came to my bedroom, and I came to the armchair where usually my cat sits, and now I took over his place.
Right on.
So I think I need to give back the chair to him. He's very upset.
Yes. Well, like I said, thank you very much for coming on the show, and thank you for telling me about your story, your political story, and a little bit of your history. Maybe we'll catch up a little bit more on that on our next video. And like I say, I really appreciate you doing this. Now, once I get off, what I will ask is if you have any websites. Actually, you can do it right now before. So you can do it right now just to let the people know if there's any websites or any YouTube channel or any social media pages that you want to promote. Go ahead and do so now verbally, but at the same time, in a message, send me anything that you want me to link in the video. And once the video is already done, I'll also share it back in a message, the link to it. And then if you want, you can download it and upload it to any one of your platforms that you want. I'm not claiming it's our conversation. So you're, even though it's being done on my channel, you're more than willing to download it if you want and use it for whatever you see wish or whatever.
Well, I found it very fruitful, so I'm gonna, upload in my Facebook, in my ThinkSpot, and share among friends who are allergic to social media. So I'm gonna send them directly by email. So yeah, hope we can spread the message. I think that's the whole point of this, and be in touch. Yeah.
Yes, for sure. And I'll see you probably contribute back and forth, probably a couple things on ThinkSpot in between.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Victor,
So
have a great day. Go ahead.
No, just want to wish you a good weekend. Here in Hungary, it's already 9 p.m. So.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. So it's getting late over there. So thank you very much once again.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon. All right. You have yourself a good one. Okay.
Bye-bye. Cheers.
Okay. Where do we go here? There we go. Excellent. All right. So sorry, everyone in the chat. I'm obviously not going to be able to do much in terms of reading from the chat today because that went a little longer than I was. Well, I mean, 45 minutes went by just trying to get it set up. But thanks for those of you who did stick around. You guys are troopers, guys and gals, for sticking around through all that crap. Maybe actually once I get it done, hopefully, I'll leave it as is. No, what I'll do is that 45 minutes, once the video's all finished processing and everything, I'll probably have to edit out that first 45 minutes. I think I can do it right through the YouTube platform without having to download it and re-upload it again. But probably not a good idea to keep that whole 45 minutes of dead space or trying to figure the mic situation out. But either way, like I say, thanks for those of you who did stick around the chat. I'm going to do another stream tomorrow with a lady. Hopefully everything works out. It's going to be the same time. What's her name? Karen, I believe. Karen Ness. And she's another one from ThinkSpot. This one is in reference to my post that I had put on there called The Myth of Authority. My 4-question quest for liberty or freedom. I've used both expressions to describe it. But basically how you can just through logic, reason, prove in 4 questions that there's no such thing as a legitimate state or a legitimate government. Now, you can call many different things. You can call something else that's voluntary or organized where people gather together and deal with each other socially and economically, but you can't call it the state because the state government has a predefined meaning and definition. Based on the predefined meaning and definition of the state or government, it's a mystical concept because human beings can't delegate an authority that they don't possess onto other human beings. We're all just average, not magical, we're not mystical, we're not gods, right? So, but this will be interesting because she's curious. It was she read that post and I guess it shocked her sensibilities, which no doubt it will. It does to most people. I know it did to me when I first started trying to learn about these concepts, and so it should prove to be a pretty interesting conversation. Trying to work through the cognitive dissonance of like say prior indoctrination or the premises that's been jammed into her head. It's a tough one. It's a tough battle, and hopefully she'll be able to go through it. Well, she's on ThinkSpot, so she's already obviously got an enlightened and open mind and is curious about these things. So like I say, that'll be tomorrow, same time, 12 p.m. Eastern. And then after that, like I said, I got a couple more set up, but I won't announce them just yet till I make sure that everything's a go. So thanks for everyone that joined up to the stream, and we'll see you tomorrow or out there on the interwebs, whether it's on Facebook or Twitter, because yeah, you know I'm active everywhere. Have a good one, everyone. Talk to you later. Snake Libertarian, and I love liberty.